Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Yes. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. وإذا سألك عبادي عني فإني غريب أجيب دعوة الداء إذا دعان وليستجيبوا لي وليؤمنوا بي لعلهم يرشدون. In this verse of the Holy Quran, Allah is using the first person singular 7 times, and this is unique amongst the verses of the Quran. The first person singular meaning I. Allah is saying I or me. And when my servants, the translation of the verse, and when my servants ask you, Anni, concerning me, that's 2. Fa'inni qareeb, verily I am near, that's 3. Ujibu, I answer, that's 4. Da'wat ad-da', the call of the caller. Idha da'ane, when they call me. So, answer me and believe in me so that you be rightly guided. This verse, one of its main axes is calling Allah, supplicating before Allah, asking something from Allah. And it gives 2 prerequisites if you want your du'as to be accepted. It gives 2 prerequisites. If these 2 prerequisites are abided by, your dua will be accepted. Ujibu da'wat ad-da', that I will answer the call of the caller, or the invocation of the invoker, or the supplication of the supplicator. But I will answer. إِذَا دَعَانَ, if they call me. Now look, it says, now this is a divine promise here. Allah is saying, I'm going to answer you. You call me, I'm going to answer you. So the question is, why are most of our du'as not answered? There's a problem here. We have to go back one step and see where have we gone wrong. First of all, it says, Ujibu da'wat ad-da', I answer the call of the caller. It doesn't say Ujibu da'wat al-Shia or Sunni. It doesn't say Ujibu da'wat al-Mu'min or Ujibu da'wat al-Kafir. It's used in absolute terms. No one is specified here. No group, no denomination, no creed, no religion, no one is specified. If you be a caller and you call, Allah will answer it. So the question is, all this calling that we're doing, all this invoking that we're doing, why aren't our du'as accepted? And here we have to see, what does the caller mean? Who is a da'a? That has to be understood here. Is someone who just verbally invokes something and supplicates something, does that qualify as a caller? Most definitely not, because all these people who are verbally calling out and supplicating, most of the things that they're supplicating, they're not given. So it's not a case of just verbally calling. That's not what is meant here. Because if we say that is meant, the verse becomes ineffective. Na'udhu billah. This is a promise from Allah. It's a divine promise. Ujibu da'wat ad-da'. That I will answer the call of the caller, the supplication of the supplicator. So here we have to see what is meant here by this calling. And who is the caller? Because even if you're Iblis and you call upon Allah, when Iblis said, Anzirni ila yawmi yub'athun, after the error that he committed, he said to Allah, give me a period of time until the day they're resurrected. Allah said, Qala innaka minal mundarin. You are of those who have been granted that time. Allah answered the call of the caller, and the caller was Iblis. We have to see, what does the verse mean? This is one of the secrets of the Quran. Allama Tabatabai has mentioned this in Al-Mizan. This commentary I'm giving you is Allama Tabatabai's, under the verse chapter 2, 186. So we have to see who is a caller. It's not the mental caller, because all those things we're mentally supplicating, we don't get them. It's not the verbal caller. Many things we haven't supplicated for, but we're given them. Look. We haven't verbally supplicated for them. We haven't mentally supplicated for them, but we are given them. I.e., we're a caller. So what is the reality of being a caller? This has to be understood. In one of the verses of the Holy Quran, I'm not sure which chapter it is, but it says, وَآتَاكُمْ, and Allah has brought forth مِن كُلِّ مَا سَأَلْتُمُ. This is one of those very luminous verses. Well, all the verses of the Quran are luminous, but whenever we get to understand them, they become very luminous for us. That Allah brings forth to you everything that they've asked for. Everything. So whatever you ask for, Allah has given you. Look, this whole concept of dua has to be, retuned. And if one understands this, one will understand Islam's take on disability, for example. They'll have a better understanding. So who is a caller then? It's definitely not those who verbally or mentally recall or say something to Allah. The caller is your innate nature, your soul, the reality of your soul, not what you think in relation to your soul, not the ego. You, the real you, the innate nature of you, the soul. The thing is, sometimes the ego doesn't even allow us to be honest to ourselves. We may not know ourselves. But the soul, moment to moment, is asking Allah. And in chapter 55, verse 29, يَسْأَلُهُ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. That whatever is in the heavens and earth, They are asking Allah. They are calling Allah, including us. Fire calls to burn, water calls to quench, for example. The sun calls to shine, the moon reflects light. Everything is calling Allah, but everything's reality is different to one another. We too, our soul, is calling out moment to moment for things. For example, our soul wants to see, wants to hear. Even though we don't say, "Oh Allah, give us sight, give us hearing," we're given it. Because our soul wants it. So the question is, how do we know what our soul wants and doesn't want? We usually don't know the answer to that question because our ego veils the soul in the sense that the ego wants several things because of it, the ego. And that hinders one to know what one's true self is. Look, the next question is, this soul which is calling out moment to moment, how was it molded? How did it evolve? And here, for example, we have to see how our parents brought us into being and how they raised us. 9 months in gestation, for example. 2 years breastfeeding. All these with what money, in what environment, with what thinking processes. It has an effect on the child. Even actions that your ancestors may have done. And then in the first 7 years, the second 7 years, all these, there's an infinite number of factors which all play a role in molding this soul. And it's not, only to trace it, you don't only trace it back to one's parents, to one's grandparents. Keep on going back. Actions of our ancestors pass on to the next generation, to the next generation. It's like with the physical genes, it passes physical traits from one generation to the other. We believe in spiritual genetics too, where traits and the effects of actions, they are passed on from generation to generation. So there's an infinite number of causes which all play a role in molding what is now my innate nature, your innate nature. One of those things also, which begins at around 14 years of age, a bit less or a bit more, it doesn't matter, is one's own rationality and one's own free will. That begins properly after puberty, for example. One begins to do things out of one's free will more. Otherwise, when one is a child, their free will really is under the auspices of their parents or others. But until then, look at the baggage they've accumulated. It may be positive, it may be negative, but it's building, it's shaping this soul. And all the wants of the soul, whatever the soul wants, it's going to be given. But what's predetermined all this? Actions of ancestors. And oneself. But look what a small role this free will has. But the potential of a free will, it can do wonders. But still, if the parents, the grandparents, don't do their share, that child is going to be limited. For example, if they drink alcohol and the child is born without a limb, that child's going to be limited. There's still room for improvement, but they're still going to be limited. Is that fair? We say no. But the unfairness is attributed to actions of the parents. It's all cause and effect. Everything is cause and effect in this realm. And so you don't pray for seeing, but you see. You don't pray for hearing, but you hear, because the soul wants it. But if someone is disabled, their eyesight, for example, they don't have eyesight, or their hearing is disabled, that means they don't want it. Now this is where the question of disability, according to Islam, is answered in this way. According to the Urafa, of course. The theologians may have a different understanding, that's okay. I'm just sharing with you what the Urafa say. As a result of a number of cause and effects, for whatever reason, but it's through cause and effect, someone is disabled. First of all, let's clarify that this disability is not a punishment because of what their parents did. It's cause and effect. If the parents drink, I keep on giving this analogy because it's easier to digest, but it's the same applies in spiritual terms. If they drink alcohol whilst pregnant and the child is born without a limb, being born without a limb isn't a punishment, is not a punishment. Punishment is in the hereafter, not in this dunya. It's not a punishment, it's a result of cause and effect. You did that action, this is what you're going to is going to happen like that. That's why we care for the environment. If we use a lot of CFCs, for example, we're going to pollute the environment. Not that this is a punishment given by Allah to those in future generations. It was our irresponsibility, for example. But for whatever reason now, the child or the person is not seeing, or is disabled, not hearing, for example. And they say, oh Allah, give me sight. Give me sight, give me hearing. And they pray for this. And it's okay to pray, because praying, entering dialogue, that was something, entering dialogue with Allah, irrespective of what the results were. Don't conclude from this lecture, so why do we pray? Praying has another benefit. You're entering dialogue with Allah, irrespective of the result. That becomes connected with the concealed shirk lectures we've been given. When you have concealed shirk, all of religion will be reinterpreted in a totally different way. So, when they're saying, a blind person, for example, oh Allah, give me sight, or a deaf person, give me hearing, or whatever, in reality, their soul isn't asking for it. And they don't want it. And that's why they don't have it. But more importantly, they don't need it, if only they knew. And this applies to any disability. These are just physical disabilities, even with spiritual disabilities. Yes. The thing is, they don't even need it. If they were in connection with the true self, even though they're blind, they would be very much freer than me and you who see. The inner comfort, if they would know their selves, they wouldn't even be asking for it. And that's something very important for everyone when you pray and you're not given. Although you do your best. If you don't do your best and you're not given, maybe if you did your best, that would have been acting responsibly and you may have given it. It just depended on you making an effort. But sometimes when you do your duty action-wise and you're not given it, maybe you don't need it. maybe the soul is not calling for it. The ego is, I want to see, I want to hear, but the soul isn't calling for it. Sometimes you see that this idea that there's a number of parameters and factors and causes which lead to the molding of the soul. You see that in a tribe or in a particular race before disseminating. You see common traits amongst them. For example, they all share certain traits because they all share that a significant number of those causes which molded the soul. They shared that to some degree, and so many of them shared those traits. It's because of this. And so here, one of the uses of eliminating the ego is once the ego is eliminated, you will get to know your true self. You know what you want. And that's very important in adopting a lifestyle, choosing a profession. For those who don't know themselves and therefore don't know what their inner reality is asking for. Because sometimes you may say, oh Allah, give me a house, give me a house. And you keep on saying that. But it's not a house which the soul wants. It's tranquility, for example. But the ego is, because of stereotypes, has been diverted. Its attention has been diverted to a house because of the norms that society has brought. But actually, it's not the house that you're asking for. Or for example, marriage. They keep on getting delayed, marrying. They make an effort. Some people don't make an effort, but those who do make it, something always happens, last minute, becomes cancelled or something. They don't want to marry. Look. Now, here, when you want to choose, now for us who are drowned in our egos, how can we tell what our soul wants? Because if we find access to this, it'll be very helpful when we want to choose a profession or a lifestyle. Here, there's one of two ways. Either the ego has to go, that's very difficult. But the second way is, if you're 20, 30, 40 years old, 50, whatever, you look at your life, you analyze the life patterns that you've gone through. And you see that, for example, these are just examples again. You can think of better examples. But for example, someone wanted to start a business for the last 20 years. Every time they've come to start a business, they failed. Something happened. It means the soul wasn't asking for it, doesn't want it, and that's why it hasn't been granted to them, because they don't want it. So they go and find something else. Or you look at your life patterns, you see, from childhood I remember, I've always been doing things which were dangerous. There are some people who always go towards dangerous things, where life-threatening things. And they see a pattern with this trait, that they want it. And when you want that, you go and find a profession which is on a par with that. For example, the army. They will be a good commander-in-chief, for example. That's what they want. So you have to be very honest to yourselves. Look at the life patterns and see, can you find any secrets or codes or any patterns that you see that, yes, it seems I have these. It's part of who I am, but I was oblivious to myself. And here, then you can choose a profession. That would be, yes. You can choose a lifestyle. And with disability, we shouldn't see it as a disability in real terms, because the soul doesn't want it. What the soul doesn't want to see, the soul doesn't want to see. If the blind, the deaf, the one without a limb, and so on and so forth, if they were in contact with the self, they wouldn't see oneself as disabled at all. They would see themselves much beyond that. Very free, independent people. They may have a disability on the outside, but inside they're much freer than those who don't have that disability. But if they're in their egos, it's difficult. They keep on asking for it and they're not given it. As I say, the asking has to be paired with action. And only then, when you're not given it, then, yes. So, that's one criterion of your du'as being accepted. You have to be a da'a, but the da'a isn't what one's ego is dictating. And the second is إِذَا دَعَانِ, when they call me. They have to call me. It has to be me though, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. i.e., they have to break from everyone else. They have to detach themselves, disassociate from everything else, and only be attentive to me. If that happens, I'll give them it, whatever they want. For example, you go to a bank for a loan, or to a person to get a loan, but you're relying on the person or the bank manager and a whole number of other people or things, and that's why you get disappointed. You don't rely on Allah alone when you ask someone for money. You don't rely on Allah alone when you go to ask to be cured by a doctor. You don't rely on Allah alone when you go and buy fruits, for example, from the grocer, and so on and so forth. You have to be only dependent upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes a non-believer, a Hindu, a Buddhist, or any other non-believer, they may detach from everything and then call an entity, but they truly detach from everything, but they're a non-believer. Yes. And for example, when they're dying, or in the process of drowning, for example, or an event is happening, it's so disturbing that they break from everything in this world and they call someone. It doesn't matter that someone we don't have to give a name, okay? And they may not know what Allah means, God means, or whatever. But that breaking from everything and calling out, and then you see they're given that thing which they want. Look, they're given it. Look, they're not believers. They may not follow a Sharia. I'm not saying they'll go to heaven. I'm not saying that. I'm saying Allah's giving is based on cause and effect. It's not specific to Shias or Sunnis or the religious. Iblis's innate reality, Iblis's soul, was very misguiding in nature. He was a true misguider. His very nature was like that. And when he wanted something from Allah, Allah gave it to him. The verse we started with. But he was given it. But he was Iblis. Whoever you are, any creature you are, when you call Allah, that whatever name you want to give it, but you've done it when you've detached from everything else, and then you want a source, an entity to give you something, He'll give it to you. And that's why many non-believers are given many things. It's based on cause and effect. It's not a case of only Muslims getting whatever they want. And even with non-believers, their innate reality, their soul, is molded by their previous generations and their previous generations. And what their previous generations do, the good actions are passed on to the next generation and to the next generation. Sometimes someone converts to Islam at 20 years of age, for example. That's not really possible to convert. Converting is very difficult. No person, let's say that the rationality starts from puberty onward, let's say 12, 13, 14, whenever the signs arise, and one enters the age of puberty and one's rationality starts to be more and more strong, then after 5 or 6 years you convert to another religion. That's not really possible. It means this person who's converted, the previous generations of that person did good deeds, be they as Christians or Jews or whatever, but they did good deeds. The good deeds do pass to the next generation. And so this new generation is now bearing the fruits of the previous generation. And it keeps on continuing until one generation, someone comes, they just make a bit of an effort with their rationality, with their aql, they make that click and they become a Muslim. And when they become a Muslim, all their ancestors become Muslim. It has an effect on them. It's a day of jubilee for them. Why? Because this new convert is a product of their actions too. Their Hayaatun Tayyibah has continued. And that's why Hayaatun Tayyibah, children are the best righteous legacies to have. Especially if you bring them up properly, they are the best righteous legacies that you can have. Children. The more the better. And they are part of your actions. And they can do things and you will benefit to some degree in the hereafter. I mean, if you're in hell, it doesn't mean you'll go to heaven or anything, but it means for example, punishment you have, it'll be lessened in that stage of hell that you're residing in. Or if you're in one stage of heaven, it doesn't mean with that conversion or that good deed of your child, you'll go to a much higher degree. It means the punishments relative to that stage in heaven that you are will be increased. But still, that's good. So these two are two important criteria, two important prerequisites to have in du'as. The rest are secondary things. Praying at this time, in this way, with this adab, with these etiquettes, sitting, standing, crying, on Fridays, other than Fridays, these are etiquettes, secondary things. They're important. And the importance is mainly because it provides an environment where when you're entering dialogue with Allah, it kind of increases your humility, your wretchedness, your destitution before Allah, seeing yourself as nothing. But in relation to getting what you're asking for, no. They don't have a causal role. Causal role is those two prerequisites mentioned in the verse. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
You mentioned a part where you said the children, if they do good, the ancestors will feel the effects.
Yes, yes.
Vice versa is true as well, correct?
No, that depends. That depends. That depends when the parent, is that the question, or you want to, that's the question? Yes. So look, sometimes the parent, the grandparent, or the ancestor, it doesn't matter, they did their responsibility, they did what they had to do, but the child may have gone in another direction because of other non-parental or ancestor causal factors. For example, a bad teacher, a bad friend, a bad education somewhere, yes. And then the child becomes, for example, ideologically compromised. That here, the parent or the grandparent or the ancestor won't suffer there, because they did their due, they did their responsibility. It's only when they failed in relation to their responsibility, and as a direct result of that, the child was misguided, then they will, yes, suffer.
Another question, in part of your lecture you touched religious pluralism.
No, that wasn't religious pluralism. Actually, I tried to, that was cause and effect, and Allah giving to all people. The philosophy of why Allah gives is because whenever someone breaks from everyone else, Allah will give them, even though they don't know Allah. Okay? But religious pluralism is something else. And since this is quite a hot topic, let me just say, because religious pluralism, depending on how you define it, it can be okay. Okay? In this sense, it's okay, religious pluralism, what I'm about to say now. That we believe that the Quran, it's in getting you to Allah, 100% of the Quran and 100% of how to get to Allah is mentioned in the Quran. It's all in the Quran. In the book of the Jews, let's say it's 70%. In the book of the Christians, let's say it's 50%. Because it's been distorted, even if they weren't distorted, it would have been less. Because some prophets are greater than other prophets. When the Quran says some prophets are greater than other prophets, it means the books of those prophets too are greater than the books of other prophets. Every divine book is a product of that divine prophet. So the route to salvation of the Quran, it's 100%. The route to salvation of the Injil, let's say 70%, if it's not distorted. The route of salvation of, let's say, the Torah is 50% if it's not distorted. If they're distorted, 70% becomes 60, let's say, or 50. 50% becomes 40 or 30, you see? Now, if I may be a Muslim and abide by 80% of the 100% which was before me, I will abide by it and I will benefit 80%. I will lose out on 20%, but I will benefit. I acted 80% on a par with the Quran. But I may be a Muslim and act upon 20% of the 100% which was before me. I will benefit 20%, but predominating over my 20% will be 80% I didn't act upon. A Christian maybe have access to 50% of truth compared to what the Quran had 100%, and they act upon 40% of that. They may benefit more than us, you see. If you say every member of every religion has equal access to the truth, the whole truth, which some people may say and say this is religious pluralism, that we say is wrong. That's attributing deficiency to the Quran, to the Holy Prophet. But if you say everyone has a share of some degree of truth, what's wrong with that? Because even if someone is a non-believer and they act upon 10% of the Quran, they will benefit 10%. Even if they're a mushrik, we had this. How is their benefit? Like Hayaatun Tayyibah, he was a mushrik in the time of the Prophet. And he denied the Prophet until the very end. But he did many good deeds. He wouldn't hurt anyone. He wouldn't cheat, steal, all these things. He would give a lot of charity. These actions are, let's say, 10% of the Quran. But he didn't do salat, no fasting, no this. No. So they want to know what's going to happen to him. The Holy Messenger said he won't go to heaven because he had no aqa'id. He was aqa'id free. But in the hell, which he's going to reside, we're going to provide an abode for him in hell. We won't let the fire reach him. Look. Many Muslims may have to burn a bit before they go to their heaven. But we'll give him a place there, and every morning, every night we'll send someone to provide sustenance. But he's in hell. So that 10% is manifested in some degree there. Yes. In this way it's okay, religious pluralism. So it depends what is meant. But if you say access to the whole truth is equal, whoever you are, from whatever denomination, from whatever religion, that's something, you're talking against the Quran here. Yes.
And so to a follow-up question on what you mentioned, that if we have access to the 100%,
yes,
and we act on just 20%,
yes,
we will be judged accordingly,
yes,
and even more harshly,
yes, yes,
since we had access to the 100%.
yes, 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 yes. Yes, it's a good job you came a bit later than in the lecture. Just imagine if you were in from the beginning, how many questions you would have had. Yeah. Yes.
So
Yes.
does that mean
Yes.
we're only then accountable for the share we're exposed to?
You mean as Muslims?
Any human being?
Yes, yes. But for Muslims it's the most. Yes. But the thing is, you wanted to be a Muslim. You see? The inner, you wanted it. Yes. Yes.
Most of the books are distorted.
All the books, apart from the Quran, yes.
So then
That reduces, it doesn't make it 0%. I'm saying even a mushrik who does humanitarian deeds, at least they may have 10% of the share of the Quran without knowing it. Yes. Yes. Bismillah. We have one tradition from Imam Baqir where a mushrik gives refuge to a Muslim in Darul Kufr. Look, just imagine in the UK, all the refugees they're accepting towards. They give all these refugees asylum. This giving asylum existed then. Muslims wanted to flee oppressed lands, and then a mushrik in Darul Kufr gives asylum to a Muslim so that you can live here in peace. When Imam Baqir says this, that Allah says that I swear by my honor that for this mushrik, they were mushrik, so there's no heaven, but in hell I will provide food for them in hell. And that's it. Yes. Yes. So it's very difficult to judge, and we don't know. Yes. So this idea that everyone will go to heaven, that's wrong. It's a wrong irfan. If you see some urafa say that, we don't accept that idea of irfan. Yes. Yes.
Maulana, when you spoke specifically about disabilities, you said that it's not a form of punishment. Is it the same, for example, when a human being in the life loses something or is not successful in obtaining something? Sometimes we tend to view those as punishments for something we may have done prior to that. Is it the same concept? That
Yeah.
when one goes through a burden, for example, you spoke about burden.
Yes. No, you see, no, it's not the same, but I have to explain here that what I was explaining was purely cause and effect. One's free will had no interference into the equation. But sometimes you make a decision, you plan something, then you lose. That free will has entered that. And that may be a result of not doing it properly, for example. In some traditions, it does mention that before dying, in order to erase your sins, not to give you punishment, but to erase your sins, you'll lose property, you'll lose your offspring, you lose your health. And this is for some of the mu'mineen, so that when they die, they enter the heaven of Barzakh automatically. They become erased, cleansed in this world. And the opposite, for example, sometimes someone is a non-believer, but they've done a lot of good. They may be a hypocrite, but they've done a lot of good. With the munafiqeen, Allah will want to give them the rewards in this dunya, and they keep on giving rewards to them. Good children, a lot of wealth, good health, so that their rewards are given in this dunya, but when they go in the hereafter, it's going to be difficult. So that's one thing. The other is, there's a principle we have in the Quran that in ahsantum li'anfusikum wa in asa'tum falaha. If you do good only to yourself, not to anyone else. You don't have that capacity. And if you do bad, you can only do bad to yourself, not to anyone else. So if I give charity to someone, assuming it's done with khulus, I've done good to my soul, I'm elevating. But when I give $20 to someone, have I done good to them? If you're an economist, you say yes, you've done $20 good. But Quranically, to see whether you've done good or not, it says we don't know. It depends that recipient, what they did with the $20. You've given $20, you've only done good to your own soul, not to their soul. The criterion is their soul. They may use that $20 for haram, they may use it for good, but then that has to be looked upon separately. If they used it for haram, they've depressed their soul. If they've used that $20 for good, they have done good to themselves. And therefore in the Quran this principle holds. And even if you do bad, if someone steals from me or hits me or wrongs me in any way, they've wronged themselves by doing this sin of stealing or cheating or abusing. They've wronged themselves, their soul. Have they wronged me? The answer is, I don't know. We don't know yet. It depends. How did your soul counteract that action of stealing? They stole $20 from you. Did you complain, groan, make everyone's life a misery and everything? If you did, you've depressed your soul. But did you say inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un and say it wasn't my money? Alhamdulillah, I'll just continue. You've elevated your soul. But this elevation or depression of the soul is in your hands. No one can depress your soul. Only you can. No one can elevate your soul. Only you can. Yes. And the hereafter is a function of one's soul. So that's why it can't be punishment, what your ancestors did coming to you. Punishment or reward, it's a function of the soul, and that's in your hands. Yes. There. Yes.
You mentioned earlier about the different inclinations of the mind and the soul. For example, the big desire for tranquility, that's the mind, that's the soul's home. The proof of the mind is a house. And then
Right, yes.
so can you explain more about this relationship between
I didn't say mind and soul. I didn't say that. I said that the ego says they want a house, but the reality is that you don't want a house. You want tranquility. It's just that you don't know yourself. It's veiled with that concealed shirk. It's only when it's cleansed, then you can make a proper decision. That's the spiritual wayfaring route. But the academic route is just analysing one's life patterns. Yeah. Yes.
So what is the viewpoint from a spiritual, analysis on a spiritual level? What is the viewpoint that we have on illnesses such as mental or emotional illnesses like depression and these feelings of inefficiency that human beings can have? How do we treat those?
Yes, here it depends if the depression, for example, if it's psychological and environmentally triggered, or if it's a chemical imbalance of the brain. If it's the former, and certain events of the environment led you to be depressed, that would be a lack of tawheed. And the solution would have to be through tawheed, but the counsellor has to break down exactly which environmental factors it was, and then change their worldview, and then cleanse them with tawheed, deconstructing their mental constructs. Because, for example, they lost money, they become depressed. The mental construct being, it was my money. You see, all this has to be... That's problematic, psychological depression, all that. But clinical depression, no. Like bipolar or different other forms of... These are chemical imbalances of the brain. And I'm not saying medication is the first line of treatment. Psychotherapy may help. But if it doesn't, what the medication does is just balances that imbalance. And that stability is important if one wants to progress. It doesn't mean you're weak in Iman. You just have this chemical imbalance. Now that chemical imbalance is a result of an infinite number of causes that preceded you. But now you have it. And yes, you have to try to stabilize it. You have to have treatment here. But if you don't, and it's very difficult to persevere, don't think that... Some people ask me, for example, they have bipolars, they want a dua. They want a dua to get rid of this. I mean, it doesn't work like that. You can't discard or dismiss the physical causes of treatment. Dua is also one aspect to it. When you go and act based on the physical causes too, because the physical causes are a manifestation of Allah's attributes too. Discarding and dismissing them, you're dismissing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right now, for example, for bipolars, this is the physical treatment. If psychotherapy doesn't help, then they give medication. And it's a very difficult medication. It has to be taken in a particular way. It has to be withdrawn from in a particular manner. But then you get stability, then you can start normalizing. But it's not your fault, it's not a weakness, and it's not a deficiency of one's tawheed. But now, how are you going to counteract this chemical imbalance? That's in your hands. Yes, one last question. 2 questions, yes, no problem. Yes. Yes.
What is the philosophy of that?
Yes. Subhanallah means any type of deficiency that you can imagine. Any type of deficiency. Allah is free from that. So whatever deficiency there is, Allah is free from such a deficiency. Yes.
One more thing, you will bring of the name of Allah.
Pardon?
Name of Asmaul Husna, we did, we took out tasbih 100 times, Ya Allah.
Yes, Ya Allah, yes.
What impact does it give, and what is the philosophy of that?
Imam Khomeini, from his mentor, gave this example. So Imam Khomeini's mentor in Sayr Suluk gave this mentor that a parent and a toddler, an infant, and the parent wants to teach the toddler to speak and says, Mummy, Daddy, for example, Baba, Mama, whatever language. He keeps on saying it with a lot of pain. Keeps on practicing. He gets a bit tired after a while. Or suddenly the toddler says, Mummy, for example. Then the parent, all that fatigue goes away with utmost joy. Then continues more and more and says, with other words and other words. The more the toddler speaks, the more the parent continues. And then after a while, the toddler is now saying it, and the mother or the father, they repeat after the infant. Whenever the infant says it, yes. Here, the wayfarer, the verbal wayfarer, they are the parent. The toddler is the heart here. We're doing talqeen. We're inculcating the dhikr, the invocation, into the heart, like the parent does it into the toddler. But it has a lot of prerequisites. Before you do this, you have to abide by a number of prerequisites. Otherwise you won't succeed. And they mention what the prerequisites are in spiritual wayfaring. And then so you do talqeen of the heart, and then the heart opens up. And that is very important. When you say, Ya Fattah, sometimes it's a verbal thing. You're saying Fattah, but the heart, it hasn't entered the heart yet. But sometimes your heart is seeing Ya Fattah, and then you say Ya Fattah. That is important, because it's entered your heart. And that's why the salat, the adhkar, the tasbih, we're told to repeat it 5 times a day, this many times a day, 100 times the tasbih, because we're inculcating, doing talqeen into the heart. Once the reality of the dhikr enters the heart, now you're growing. 2 questions finished? Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala